Born and raised near Cleveland, Ohio, Mary Oliver would leave her difficult home to write poems in a hut she built from sticks and grass. Mary studied at Ohio State University and Vassar College, but unfortunately never received a degree. Oliver lived in the house of Edna St. Vincent Millay for a period of time and was greatly influenced by her. During this time, Oliver met her longtime partner, Molly Malone Cook. Together, they moved to Massachusetts, where the landscape influenced Oliver's work. They lived there and in Florida until Oliver's death in early 2019 at the age of 83. Her poetry frequently focused on the quiet occurrences of nature and won many awards, such as the Pulitzer Prize. One of her poems of transformation is called The Journey.
The Journey by Mary Oliver. One day, you finally knew what you had to do, and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. Though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save.
This poem is about the birth of a new self, where one discovers their deeper identity. A new life begins for the subject as they listen to their own voice. This poem is written in a free verse structure. By definition, this is a poem without regular meter or rhyme. The entire poem is one long stanza, giving the idea that the journey is one continuous experience. There is one example of internal rhyme in this poem. Lines 1 and 2 say, "You finally knew what you had to do." The poem is one long, extended metaphor. The journey is meant to represent someone's experience through life. It represents their spiritual journey and how one must face challenges before reaching the end. Before trying to analyze the deeper meaning of this poem, we must first understand the literal meaning. Lines 1 through 5 say, "One day you finally knew what you had to do, and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice." This is saying that the subject knows that they must embark on their journey, despite people around them telling not to. Lines 6 through 11 say, "Though the whole house began to tremble, and you felt the old tug at your ankles, mend my life," each voice cried. Here, the subject is scared, and people cried for their help. Lines 12 through 18 say, "But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible." At this point, the subject knows they must complete their journey. They are determined even though the wind got in the way and they saw the terrible sadness of the people calling for help. Lines 19 through 22 say, "It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones." These lines explain that there will be many obstacles and difficulties throughout the journey that the subject will have to overcome. Lines 23 through the end say, "But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheet of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company, as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. This ending to the poem explains how the subject left the bad voices behind and finally begins hearing their own voice. They have transformed their life and now know their true self. Many symbols exist throughout the poem. The wind, the night, the road with branches and stones, and the tug at your ankles can all stand for hardships that one experiences in life. Later on in the poem, more positive symbols begin appearing. For example, the stars burning through the sheets of clouds are sudden realizations breaking past previous uncertain thoughts. The subject's vision becomes more clear as they break away from society and truly find their identity. Repetition of some line formats may represent the repeating mistakes one makes in life. Lines 3 and 6 say, "Though the voices around you," and "though the whole house." Lines 14 and 17 take on a similar structure and say, "though the wind pride," and "though they're melancholy." The poet may be using the same sentence structure to show a mistake being repeated through the journey. The subject is unable to let go of the bad voices and must repeat these mistakes before being able to move on. Other poetic devices seen here include personification and enjambment. Personification appears at lines 14 and 15 saying, "though the wind pried with its stiff fingers." Oliver allows the wind to complete human actions and act as an obstacle in the journey. Also, enjambment is used throughout the poem. One example is lines 28 and 29, saying, "which you slowly recognized as your own." This thought continues past just one line and surprises the reader. The reader is wondering who this new voice belongs to, and they don't find out until they reach the next line. Also, this break in the line shows the difficulty of the journey. The enjambment allows the poet to portray how she has overcome challenges before finally listening to her own voice. The attitude of the poet at the beginning is very negative. Oliver uses language such as bad advice, tremble, and melancholy to depict this mood. A little more than halfway through the poem, line 23 says, "but little by little." This is the turning point of the poem. The mood suddenly switches to positive and uplifting. The subject stops listening to the bad voices and finally starts listening to their own voice. Now, Oliver uses language such as "stars begin to burn" and "a new voice." The subject now has a fresh view on life and discovers their deeper identity. As a very inspiring poem, the journey has a theme of determination and discovery. Whatever your journey may be, this poem encourages you to work past the obstacles and reach your destination. Specifically, Oliver's journey was to discover herself. Although feeling lost at first, she works through hardships and comes out knowing her true self.